Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, which is the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. There's more information on our website, womensdeclaration.com, where you'll find our declaration on women's sex-based rights, which has been signed by 37,724 people from 160 countries and is supported by 523 organisations. We've many volunteer activists and we have country contacts from every continent. Do join us. You can become either a member, a volunteer, or donate, and certainly come along to these Feminist Question Times. I'm really pleased today that we have three fantastic speakers, and we're going to have a couple of extra ones coming in to Zanne's talk. So we've got Sall Grover, who you can see now. Hi, Sall, from Australia, and she's going to update us on the Tickle and Giggle versus Giggle case, the incredibly important case, which will have implications for all of us, the case of gender identity versus sex. And she's also just come from the Do No Harm conference in London and going to give us a bit of an update about what's been happening there. And that will be really great to hear a bit from that. And then we're going to have Zanne from the USA. She's going to share with us the world premiere of the video celebrating so many women at 35. And we're going to have a couple of other panelists on with Zanne to discuss that. We're going to first go to our first speaker, who is Sall Grover. So Sall is the Australian founder and CEO of Giggle, a female-only social networking app. In 2021, Sall received an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint from Roxanne Tickle, alleging gender identity discrimination for not allowing him, a male who claims to be female, on the platform. The AHRC complaint led to a Tickle versus Giggle, the most ridiculously named Australian federal court case of all time. However, the ridiculousness is matched by seriousness, as while the complaint is gender identity discrimination, Sall removed Tickle from the app on the basis of his biological sex. Apart from telling us about this case, you've also just been at the first Do No Harm conference in London. And can you tell us about that? And then move on to the case.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I was just really lucky when I was contacting everyone saying I was coming over. Sex Matters invited me to go to the conference today. And I didn't realize it was going to be so awesome. It was amazing. So I arrived and there were protesters outside and they had like a megaphone and they were just talking. But I walked in fine. And then once I was upstairs, everyone was saying no one else can get in. They've stopped it from getting in. They've let off a smoke bomb, like craziness has happened. And it was only after I left that I watched the videos of what it was like. It was crazy. But actually inside the event was marvelous. It very much had like, the adults in the room feeling. It was just everyone going like, this, obviously this has to stop. How are we going to get it to stop?
There was quite a lot of medical experts. Mm-hmm. And did you feel that the mood has really shifted then, that we're getting a critical mass of medical experts on side?
I think so. I mean, I think there's still fear, but just more and more every day, I suppose. I don't know if we'd be at critical mass yet in the medical part. I don't know that world well enough, but no, it was quite positive in the sense of like, it's one of the really great parts of it. They were saying, sort of stop this, that, there's this certainty, with the gender ideology, like, these kids, they go, or adults, that they go to the doctors with this utter certainty and it's affirmed, whereas it's evidence-based that needs to happen. And obviously there's no evidence for any of this. So no, it was just, just the stuff of like, yeah, I mean, it is completely normal for a certain section of young kids to have basically personalities and tastes that are just different from what is the norm of average for their sex, and most of them grow up gay. That's the evidence that they do have. And when I was listening to it all, I was just thinking, I've got a 20-month-old daughter, and she can play with any toy that she wants, and I dress her in quite neutral colors. I don't like the florally, frilly things. My mom does, so you can always tell when my mom has dressed my daughter compared to when I have. But what Belle naturally, like, she can play with whatever she wants, but she does naturally gravitate to like her doll. And I'm finding it interesting to observe that, because it's not like I have another baby or something like that she's trying to emulate. She just has this little bubba and she pushes her around in a little stroller and she loves it.
I used to dress my eldest daughter in lots of boys' clothes because we had lots of nephews and got loads of hand-me-downs that were male. And when she got a consciousness, when we went to playgroup and she realized that she was girl and that I was dressing her in boys' things, she just turned up one morning, like at breakfast, and addressed herself. And I sort of went, "What? Why have you dressed yourself? Like, why have you?" And she said, "Well, I'm not. These. I want to wear this." And she picked out all these little dresses. Like,
So
and I was like,
cute.
"No, no, no." But of course, it's freedom, and she wanted to fit in, and she knew that she was a girl, so she felt like, why not do the girl thing? And I mean, now she's very neutral, but I thought it was really amusing that for all my best efforts of not making her hyper feminine,
Yeah, I know. I do
she did
wonder
the
if I'm going
most
to end
feminine
up with,
stuff.
yeah, I think I'm going to end up with this girl that loves like florals and frills, which I really don't like. But yeah, whatever. I mean, it's literally her choice. I buy a lot of her clothes in the boys department actually, because I actually think the clothes are cuter. Like the little toddlers, they just, the girls' clothes do have, those horrible slogans like, like be nice. I'm not dressing my daughter in a shirt that says that. She's under no obligations to be nice to anyone.
Let's carry on then. So you're going to tell us a bit about or a lot about Tickle versus Giggle, the case of gender identity versus sex. So I'm going to go off screen again and over to you on that.
Okay. So basically, like as the introduction said, so it was actually January 2022, I got an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint for gender identity discrimination. How it works basically is you can settle a dispute in the Australian Human Rights Commission before it escalates to go to court. But to settle this, they were saying that I would have to let Tickle on the platform, let all men who claim to be women on there go to sex and gender education, which could only be re-education. And I would have to moderate the content so not to offend men who claim to be women. And I was like, there's absolutely no way am I agreeing to any of this. It completely defeats the purpose of it, of having a female-only platform. It's supposed to be a place where women can actually speak freely, and here is this man not only wanting to be on the platform, but to actually control it, which I think is, as we sort of see time and time again, pretty typical behavior. And so I said no to conciliation. I was 15 weeks pregnant when I got the complaint. And by this point, I was in like end of second, early third trimester. It was stressful. To be frank, I did not want to go and sit in a room with him. I have no interest. I've never met this person. I have no interest in meeting this person. As time has gone on, I'm actually scared of him. So I also I felt that the Australian Human Rights Commission were against me. And they were not taking into consideration my human rights, and by extension, the human rights of all women. And also actually men as well, anyone who does not believe in gender identity ideology. So I said no. And then, so basically if it's not resolved in the Australian Human Rights Commission, they advise the applicant that if they want, they can take it to federal court. They can file in federal court. They have 60 days to do it. He did it on the 60th day. Yeah, so he filed in court. I got a barrister, solicitor, everything. We were getting ready to do our first response to it. And then he withdrew. And I was like, is this a win? Like, did we just sort of stand our ground? I didn't really know, but I sort of took the win. We then actually, about 2 months later, we took the app offline, completely unrelated, but we basically had to do updates. And we'd spent all this time sort of treading water and just trying to, wait out all of this nonsense. And we'd learned a lot of what our core user base really wanted on the platform, for how to function and whatnot. And so obviously we're on a shoestring budget, so I can't do a big build to do like renovates an app like Elon can, for example. I don't have Elon's budget. So we were like, okay, we'll just take it off for a few months and then we'll relaunch, and hopefully, it will be a cleaner launch than it was last time when it was trans activists who sort of found it and cancelled me straight out of the gate. But before we could relaunch it, Tickle refiled in federal court, and he refiled on that same claim, that initial one. So by this point, he was actually 260 days or thereabouts out of time. And so he had to get permission from the court for it to go ahead. So the hearing for that was in April of last year, and the judge allowed the case to go ahead, and he allowed it essentially because it's in the public interest. That was like one of the big reasons, which is correct. It is in the public interest. And I mean, my position very much is like, I want this issue to be resolved. So if I'd rather just have the fight now and resolve it rather than this continue on for any longer. So then in August of last year, the Australian Human Rights Commission intervened in the case as amicus curiae, which is friend of the court. It's quite a normal thing for like the Australian Human Rights Commission to do. They have a statutory right to do it. They intervene in lots of different cases. You can read their submissions into Tickle v Giggle. They're on the Australian Federal Court website if you just type in Tickle v Giggle, and they are worth reading because in their application to intervene, they actually admit that there is a conflict of sex versus gender, but then they proceed to just solve this with gender, and it's absurd because how can you solve the problem with the problem? But also when you read further down, when they go into their expertise on this issue, they list the other cases that they have intervened in, and they are transing children cases. The Australian Human Rights Commission has intervened in court cases to get medicalisation to children. So I was reading it going, I can't believe that they've just put this in writing, and they're boasting about it basically, but they are, and it's there. In their actual submission to the case, when they're basically interpreting the law, it is the craziest document I've ever read in my entire life. It's like 28 pages of human beings can change sex. Sex is not binary. It's not exclusive to male and female. If a man, or if a trans woman, but I would just say man, if a man desires to be pregnant, that is sufficient for him to be considered a woman in law. They can't wrap their head around why I claim that trans men are welcome on the platform. Because on the basis of sex, they're female. Like they can't work out why I would allow that. They're utterly captured. It's a moronic document. I've said this so many times this week. It is literally like a really unbelievable draft of 1984 that even Orwell went, there's absolutely no way anyone would believe this, but the Australian Human Rights Commission has picked it up and gone, we'll give it the old college try and implement it. It's just absolute nonsense. Now, why there is this situation and sort of this muddled mess is because in 2013, Australia's first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, under her government, they did amendments to the Sex Discrimination Act, where they removed the definition of sex, removed the definition of man and the definition of woman, and then they put in gender identity, and they actually did give it a definition, but it's basically gender identity is gender identity. It's something about mannerisms. It's nonsense. It means it's absolutely meaningless. But by taking out the definition of sex and putting in gender identity, and then what the Australian Human Rights Commission is sort of doing by saying that sex can be changed and it's not exclusive to male or female, they are basically trying to create and push this concept of legal sex, which legal sex, Kathleen Stock has actually written a lot about legal sex and she's brilliant on it. Legal sex is nonsense because either it's based on biological sex or why are you even using the word? It's not like it's utter nonsense. But legal sex is basically the next step of gender identity. And so in Australia, the people who changed their identification documents, they are changing their birth certificates. So the applicant in this case has a birth certificate that says that he is female. And that would be then legal sex. Which it's always been a big question to me if I'm like, well, okay, well then if they think he's female and they think legal sex is something, then why is this case not sex discrimination? you know, it's just the thing where just absolutely nothing ever makes sense. It's all completely illogical. Because what I actually in this case admit to is sex discrimination, but under the normal Sex Discrimination Act, that's lawful sex discrimination because you can have a female-only platform. In fact, the Sex Discrimination Act itself was the exemption that allowed female-only spaces to exist, and it's why we'd have female-only gyms in Australia, or you'd have lesbian-only events, whatnot. And then now, as you know, as just moving into the future, there'll be more and more female-only things online. So this was completely lawful and normal, and no one knew that these amendments had happened. Like it's not like they were publicized. It was not like an event like when gay marriage became legal or anything. They were really done in stealth. And in Australia, not knowing a law, the status of a law is not actually a defense. My argument against that is that at no point would it have been a rational thought for me to go, oh gosh, should I just go and check if men are considered women in law? It just, you wouldn't do it. Like you don't think that men would ever be considered women in law. I knew what the law used to be and it's what it should still be. So part of our defense is a constitutional challenge, and that's basically a challenge to the 2013 amendments completely. Because there's a very, very good argument that they should not be there. Like I would just say actually like a, you know, stone tight argument that they should not be there. In Australia, for how laws can be changed if it's not sort of done through voting or something, you have, it's like the external affairs power, and I think it's the heads of power. Anyway, it's all these different things, and the laws have to stay to with like the treaties and the conventions within international law, that they are governed by, basically. So Australia's Sex Discrimination Act is governed by CEDAW, which is the, you know, the Convention of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and Girls, whatever it actually is. But it was the 1979 convention that has been signed by 189 countries in the world. The only countries that haven't signed it are the ones you'd expect to not sign it. Everyone else has. Most of them have ratified it. It's ratified in UK law, Canada. It's not ratified in the US, I don't think, but they are signatory to it. So CEDAW is a document about biological reality. Like it is actually even a document against like to protect women from bad sex-based stereotypes. So you could, there's an argument even to be made that's this is sort of separate to the legal argument, but that just CEDAW in how it is, should it actually be the thing protecting women's rights from gender identity ideology. But because the activists have essentially lied about it and just basically just claimed that it includes what they would call trans women, but it just simply doesn't. It's just a lie. There's been so many times through this where like my legal team have been explaining something to me and I don't know, I'll just be like, so they just lied. And they're like, yeah. Like, what do you mean they just lied? Like, how does this even happen? Like, how do you get away with this? I don't understand it. So they cite the Yogyakarta principles a lot, which was there was basically this conference in a few years ago on the rights of sort of sexual orientation and gender identity, which they're in conflict. But this document, Yogyakarta principles, have not been ratified. It's been rejected by the UN. They've just tried to do all these things around the edges of CEDAW to try and be like, oh, look, it includes gender identity, it thinks men are women, but it just simply does not. And what makes Australia quite unique is that both Australia and New Zealand, incorporated CEDAW into our Sex Discrimination Acts very thoroughly. So other countries like ratified it and it's incorporated or put into legislation in some various ways, but we basically went all in. So Australia is in a very strong position to defend CEDAW. So with our constitutional challenge, with that, basically what would happen is if we were to win it, hopefully, gender identity would be taken out of the Sex Discrimination Act. It would be established that sex is biological sex because it has to, so that it's not in breach of CEDAW. And then the ramifications of that around the world is it is establishing that it has been tested in court and found that CEDAW is for biological females. Like, this is an established like legal precedent now that will be relevant in every other country that has ratified CEDAW. So it would mean that, say, especially like in places like Canada, where they really are struggling to get stuff going with this, they would be able to cite it. So in terms of like the gender identity discrimination charge, you know, it's like, I didn't know this person. I don't remember even removing him. Men tried to get on all the time. I mean, I'm sure you understand, even with doing this, like how often men will sometimes try and crash something that is for women. Men, sometimes it would be thousands of men a day trying to get on Giggle. And so every now and then, like one or two would get through, of course. Like nothing, there's no technology in this planet that is perfect. But the good old-fashioned human eye does a really good job of it. And we would just be monitoring it all the time. And as soon as I saw Tickle, I just saw a man, and I just knew instantly that's a man, like as you do, as we all do when we see a human being, we know instantly whether they're male or female. And it would have been me that removed him. I don't remember it at all. It's a complete non-event. I'd removed so many men, and you know, the thousands upon thousands that had just tried to get on. And he called and texted my phone after I'd removed him, when he became sort of a person in my life that I sort of stopped and took notice of him for a second. I didn't research him at anything at this point, actually, though, but the name Roxy Tickle became relevant to me. It's kind of a name you don't forget. He called and texted my phone to say that he was wanting to go onto the app. And that's because with Giggle, the only anchor for the user to the app was the only data basically that we had was a phone number, because you have to have an anchor to basically make the app function for a user. So I was able to just type in that phone number into the server, and I just saw the picture of a man, and I was like, that's a man. So I didn't respond. I blocked his phone number. He claims that was him being reasonable to, you know, get on the platform. But I'm like, no, you scared me, and you know exactly what this platform is. Like, throughout the Human Rights Commission complaint, I actually went back and researched and was like, you know, I typed into Twitter. I was like, do I know who is this person? And I found that I'd had one interaction with him just before he went on the app. I had done a post about how TRAs are constantly leaving 1-star reviews and calling the app transphobic. And this is what happens when you're running something for women, that these men are constantly attacking it. And he had commented, and it was just this account from my perspective at that time saying, like, I'm a trans woman, and, you know, I think that we should be on women in women's spaces, or something to that effect. And I was like, you know, I was polite. I was like, I wish you well, but no, it's for females. So he knew exactly what the platform was. He knew exactly what my stance was. I also then blocked him, again, not knowing who it was, but I block trans activists every day. I mean, I've blocked like 15 today. Because I do. It's just how I try and cultivate my online experience. I don't want to hear their nonsense. But he did a tweet saying Sall Grover of Giggle has blocked me. So I even know when I blocked him, because he put it into words, and then he went on the app. So he very much knew what the app was, what my position on it was, and what would happen if I was to find him. And so I feel like the calling and texting my phone, I feel like it was just this like begging for attention or something. Then I got the Australian Human Rights Commission complaint on January 20th, 2022. And again, when we were doing research for everything, on January 24th, he was claiming to other trans activists that Giggle had been hacked and he was back on the app, and it was very affirming. I mean, he's just saying utter lies about, you know, my platform for women, which is just completely, you know, it fits into what trans activists have done since they discovered it in February 2020. So, you know, while they've done everything that they can basically to try and destroy a female-only space, I'm just like, absolutely no way. I will fight to the end with this. So if we lose in federal court, we'll appeal it to the High Court. in Australia, the High Court is only an appeals court and it is an error in law court. So basically what happens is, so we would be applying, saying an error in law has occurred because biological sex has been given no weight in the Sex Discrimination Act, which is a very strong argument to go to an error in law court. If we win in federal court and the other side applies to appeal it, they would be doing that on the basis that the error in law is that biological sex has been given weight in the Sex Discrimination Act. So it's it's utterly bizarre, but there we are. I mean, I say it all the time, I just find it crazy that we're supposed to accept that in the Sex Discrimination Act, the words discrimination and act have concrete definitions, but sex does not. But this is the crazy world we're in. So basically, I'm here in the UK because in Australia, there's such extreme censorship on this issue. Like, as I said at the beginning, the judge allowed this case to go ahead because it's in the public interest. When you go onto the site, the federal court site, why the AHRC documents are publicly available is because of the amount of interest in the case. It says it there in black and white. Not a single journalist in Australia will respond to me. I have spent a year contacting media, not one. Like, it's not even like, oh, some have. Literally not one has responded to me. They will not do anything, give any publicity to this case. And even, I mean, this is a country where every day they do articles about how brilliant the trans community is or how oppressed they are. Even they are not going all in on Tickle or anything. Like, they are literally silent about this case. And my theory on that is that these amendments were brought in stealth, and someone's like, well, if we have to lose them, we'll lose them in stealth too. That's my theory. This is just my opinion. So basically, yeah, I was like, airplanes exist. So I got on a plane and came over to the lovely Turf Island, where everyone's been really, really welcoming. And I'll be on GB News tomorrow night if everyone wants to tune in to talk about it, because this case it's the equivalent of £250,000, but so 500,000 Australian dollars. We've raised half of it so far. And this is through just the sheer generosity of everyone on Twitter. It's just been like, I'm so overwhelmed and will be forever grateful for it. But we have the other half still to go. And it is expensive. This is just how much these things cost. I mean, constitutional challenges are expensive. But how I look at it is like, if someone said, you just have to pay $500,000 and you'll get your rights back, would we all do it? I'm like, yeah, we would. Like, it would be cheap in the long run compared to all of the other nonsense we've had to do. And I also, I actually don't think that there would have been a pro bono law firm in Australia that would have taken me on. And on top of that, my legal team are brilliant and they're all women. And I think that it's really important that women are paid for their skills and their profession and their labor. I couldn't fight for women's rights without paying the women who are doing all the work. If we go to High Court, it'll be another $500,000. So that would be the next big stressful thing. So it's gigglecrowdfund.com is where everyone can read more information about the case. The hearing, it goes to court in 2.5 weeks. It's 9th to the 12th of April. We will have a verdict sometime later this year. It could be June, July, August. Then there'll be a little bit of time where it sees either if we're going to take it to federal court or if they do. But there's a chance by like about August this year, this could be completely resolved and they don't go to the High Court and we've won, or it's about another year. So we'll see.
So we're going to have our video now, and we're going to hear from Zanne. She's from the USA, and in the 1980s and 1990s, singer-songwriter Zanne performed at numerous women-centered venues in the US and Europe. She now makes music and videos in the digital realm. She's going to share with us the world premiere of the video celebrating so many women at 35. So thank you so much for sharing this with us, Zanne, and over to you.
There's so many women you could choose from. You like to have a dozen, but you only get one. There goes Nikki, she's always dressed so fine. Think she's got a girl, she's playing cool all the time. Well, you've been watching her groove, watching her dance. But before you make a move to let down her pants, remember there's so many women you could choose from. You have to have a dozen, but you only get one. Mary keeps the coats hanging nice and neat. She's always got a line to sweep you off your feet. You've been checking her butt out while she's checking your hat. But before she asks you into a dark corner for a chat, remember there's so many women you could choose from. You'd like to have a dozen, but you only get one. Lizzie's a nurse, she's serving with all that. Real cute and kind of shy, where you like them kind of quiet. Heard she's a dancer, think you're gonna start. So before you ask for lessons in the backseat of your car, remember there's so many women you could choose from. You like to have a dozen, but you only get one. There goes Benny. They say she's here from France. Well, what you've heard about those French girls, well, you gotta take a chance. You know she's got a lover. You've seen them arm in arm, but before you try to steal her with your California charm, remember there's so many women you could choose from. You like to have a dozen, but you only get one. There's so many women you could choose from. You like to have a dozen, but you only get one.
Ah, yes, so many women. In the background now is the original music track to the video, the song I wrote and recorded in 1988 in the apartment there to the right. It was my second cassette called Take One Finally. The track you heard during the video I just recorded 35 years later. How did the song come about? Well, soon after I had come out, I had found the flame, and yeah, there were so many women to choose from. Then I was gigging regularly in Cafe Spark, which was adjacent to the disco, and that's when the vignettes came into being, all taken from my observations. Liz was a bartender who I did think was very cute. Mary the coat check was a flirt. Benny, whose name was Benedict, was simply striking, and there were always women dressed to the hilt like Mickey. In the video, by the way, Liz and Benedict play themselves. For the others, there was Melissa, Teresa, Erin, Terry, Marina, Amy, and Amy Boyd, a well-known comedian, Levita, who also did the makeup, Dion, who was production manager, and Frances was the camera person, and Donna F. Walker directed and edited the video. The Flame at the time was a woman's bar managed and co-owned by a woman, Carly Kosher, which was a rarity back then. And to my knowledge, it was the only bar on the West Coast that was consistently a woman's bar. That is, it wasn't just a women's bar on Thursday nights and then a men's bar every other night. It really eclipsed everything else in San Diego and was very much a women's community hotspot. The video was screened at the 13th annual Lesbian and Gay Festival in San Francisco and the 6th annual Lesbian Film Festival in Paris. I also brought it with me when I toured Germany, France, and Switzerland in the 1990s. And I showed it in quite a few women's centers, which at the time were flourishing. It was quite wonderful. Berlin, Hamburg, Leipzig, Dresden, Stuttgart, Bielefeld, Mainz, Kiel. Those are some of the cities I remember. So it circulated quite a bit and is now on my YouTube channel. Well, it's 2024. The Flames landmark neon sign is still there. And that funky apartment house where I recorded the song is also still there, just around the corner. It's wonderful to look back on the life of so many women and celebrate its 35th anniversary.
I released this video this year at the 35th anniversary of the original video, in time for Women's History Month. I just wanted to give some background and then I'll introduce my co-makers of that video, or rather not some background, some current background. As it said in the video, it's all archival material, and I want to publicly thank the Lambda Archive, which is an LGBTQ plus archive in San Diego. I deposited all of my materials in the archive in 2012. And they've been wonderfully supportive, the director, Nicole, and the archivist, Dana, in not only making a space for archival material of our history, but also in promoting this right now in its 35th year. We're going to be doing several other events around it. They're very excited about it. And the impetus for me for doing this was, I almost didn't do it because I'm not particularly nostalgic, but a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, said, you have to do it. And although I've been very aware of the fact that our women's history is basically up to us, it really in this last few years since I've been with WDI, it's become ever more important to me to make sure that women's history, lesbian history, has a place in the archive. The archive has been around for a few decades. Only 30% of this archive is only 30% of their material is of or by women, provided by women, and 60% of it is of and by the gay male community. And then the 10% is of the bisexual and trans community. So I felt this visceral obligation to do this video and contribute to it, contribute to our history in this way. So I'd like to introduce now Donna F. Walker, the original director of it, and Dion. These guys are also old friends, who was a production manager, and talk a little bit about I think the scene then is important to talk about, not just the video making, which we did in a weekend, but the scene back then, I mean, the Flame was just this place that just everybody went, and it was a community, a community more than just a bar. What do you guys want to say about our history there in the 80s, being lesbians, gay?
The 80s were quite a fun time, weren't they? There's the hairstyles, the clothes, the music, all of that. You may have noticed at the end of the video that my name was listed as Austin. And that's because back in the day, I was in the Navy. I actually was in the United States Navy for 20 years. And we didn't have, lesbians weren't allowed to be out at that time that I was in. There was Don't Ask, Don't Tell and a couple of other things. And so I had to actually work under a pseudonym. And the pseudonym that I chose at that time was Austin. Of course, I now have been out for many years. I've been out of the Navy for over 24 years, almost 25 years now. And I've been an out lesbian, and I own a business, and there's no hiding anymore. But back then when we made the video, I was actually in the closet in the Navy. And so I just thought I'd get that out there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, wasn't it, ladies? Yep,
Yeah.
it was a lot of
Dion,
fun.
what about you? Dion has a real interesting history. You know, I was at the bar all the time because I was in the cafe part of it, which was really small and intimate, and I was there regularly, just as this performer person. But I know Dion was there, you know, has sort of a bar history in a way, not in a fun sense.
More ways than one. I'm coming up on 40 years of sobriety. And actually in that time I was sober and recently sober. And I was a club kid in the 70s, and that sort of continued on into the 80s and 90s until I moved to LA and was pursuing a bachelor's degree, and then I had to like study and couldn't go out anymore. But I went almost every weekend, usually Friday and Saturday, and you could find me on the dance floor, usually alone, sometimes with girlfriends, sometimes with new friends who ended up girlfriends. But yeah, I love dancing, and I love going. And I'd like to make one clarification. I don't think that the lesbian bars were shutting down in the 80s. I think that started more in the 90s and in probably the mid 90s with the advent of, and this happened to gay male bars as well.
Yeah.
With the advent of the internet and people could meet on the internet, then the bars started disappearing. And now I think there's like 24 lesbian bars in the entire country. And there's not that many gay male bars either. So it was the internet was a little bit of a blow to the community center. I think also when I came out, bars were where you went to find other people like you. That was the community center. And yes, there were drugs, and yes, there was alcohol, and yes, there was it was the 70s. Everybody was having sex with everybody. That was just the point in time. And then the AIDS pandemic came along, and that shifted a lot of things. But it was still that if you went to a new city, and probably Donna can talk about this in her travels while she was in the Navy, if you went to a new city and you were going to be there for a minute, you found the bar and you went to the bar. Yeah. That's where you were going to find your people. Yeah. So to have the Flame was hugely popular in part for two reasons. One, there were other lesbian bars in San Diego at the time, but they didn't have a dance floor and they didn't have a DJ.
Yeah.
So the Flame was the one lesbian club in San Diego at the time that had both a bar, that little cafe area where there was live entertainment or a place to just hang out away from the music, and a DJ and a dance floor, a real dance floor, not some like little like 5 foot by 5 foot dance floor, but a real dance floor with lights and all of that stuff. So that's what I think made it unique. And of course, the owner, Carla Kosho, was an amazing businesswoman in the community. And so she was, pretty much everything she touched ended up being successful in one form or another. And so it was great to have her put her money back into the community. And I had moved out of San Diego by the time the Flame closed, but it was a fun place to go. I had a lot of fun. I was there, like I said, almost every weekend. And the music was great, which was my main concern because I didn't drink. And so, yeah, it was a great time.
Joe and I were talking recently about, this doing this presentation, and also about the fact that there are probably lots of women here, lesbians and not lesbians, or what I mean, and who had the experience of what it was like back then, and how different it is now, that these physical places that we had were just so critical to who we were. If you were a feminist or you were a lesbian, Donna, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, we didn't have social media at all. We had to be social out in public. And these were these safe spaces we could go to identify with others who were like us. So
Yeah.
we had we didn't even have cell phones. I'm going to just bring that up. We
Yeah.
had just very few cell phones back in the day. So we couldn't even really call from wherever we were. We had to be at home calling. And so to connect, we had to actually physically bring ourselves to these safe women places. And they were safe generally inside, but sometimes outside of them was not safe. So we always had to have security and things like that, because to create a safe environment for us as women.
And police would come in and they would come in to try and see that everything was above board. But I remember one time this big burly guy came in and he had a handcuffs tie pin, and he wasn't dressed in leather, so I knew he wasn't a gay Leatherman. And he was there to, he asked for my ID, and they were there to sort of
harass
in a lot of ways, because of course they do checks anyway to make sure everybody's 21, but just the presence, like they could have sent a woman in, they didn't. They sent a man in. There was a reason why they did that, and it was a form of harassment. And I do think that I live in Michigan now, and Lansing, Michigan, just for probably about 3 or 4 years did not have a single place that was a specifically gay bar, maybe even longer than that. And just recently there was new ownership on a bar up in Lansing, Michigan, and now it is a gay bar. They have pride flags in the windows to indicate it. So I think I know that this is a global group, but anybody who's been paying attention to the political nature in the United States understands that often LGBTQ plus people are sort of red meat for the very conservative base. And so we're trotted out, especially around election time, to whip up their base voters and all of that stuff. So gay bars, I think, may have a little bit of a resurgence in some way, in terms of safe spaces to congregate again, because even if a place does a gay night or a lesbian night, it doesn't. If it's not always that, then there's the opportunity for people to come and harass if they'd like. And just a little bit of my background: when I first came out, I came out in a dance club in Seattle in 1977 called the Monastery. and it was one of the only after hours clubs in Seattle at the time, and everybody went at 2 o'clock. The whole place, 2 a.m., the whole place was full of everybody who wanted to keep dancing. And so my experience of coming out was coming out in sort of this pansexual environment. The first time I went to a lesbian bar, I thought I was going to get beat up. I didn't know how to act. And in my particular world, I prefer that kind of like focus on the dance kind of vibe. Everybody's welcome, be chill, enjoy the music kind of environment. Understand the importance of having specific spaces, not just lesbian spaces or women's spaces, but gay men's spaces. When women, gay or straight, go to a gay male space, it disrupts the interactions and the relationships that they want to have. And so being aware of the gays, the not the gays YS, but ZE, of sort of the normative crowd affects the environments that are specific to a particular group.
Yeah,
I like
well,
when we all come together, and I like it when I can be like, let me go find my people for like a while, and then I'll come back out to the world.
yeah. I mean, no, there's so much to, oh, go ahead, Donna.
I just wanted to bring up the fact that the fact that Zanne made a music video, the music is a communication tool that can be used across all platforms to all within the general straight, gay, bi, anything. The music will transcend. The music will get the word out about women loving women in a way that is usually accepted a little bit easier. It kind of ingrains, it kind of marinates in the conversation. The music marinates as you listen to it. It gets in a softer way in some ways. And so I think that the fact that Zanne chose to make her points and stand on her soapboxes in so many ways in her life. I've known Zanne for many, many years, as you too, Dion. But it was a way to also get her word and the feminist word out in a different platform.
Yeah. You know, there's so much history there's so much around this that it's not impossible to get at it in this moment or in any other moment. And but what I also want to do is just it also, and then I'll give it back to Joe, is this sense of being an elder now. It's just come to me through you doing this video and working with the archivists, who are of course much younger than I am. And it really brings to the fore how important it is to contribute to archives. I mean, they take personal things. It's not just about having something out there that, you know, like being a musician or whatever. And how important it is in this historical moment to contribute to preservation of our history, to writing our history, to pass it on to younger women, gay women, lesbians. That's how I know who I am, from reading and basically following all filmmakers, authors, all artists. I'm always looking for and always have looked for voices of women. And so I want to close with that and thank you both for coming.
Could I add one more thing real quick? Yeah. I want to point out that Zanne is a vanguard in the sense of writing her own music, recording her own music, doing her own DIY video before that became the norm, as it is now, where you can sit with a computer and in a tiny little 25 key keyboard, or not even anything at all, just a digital workstation, and make your own music. Zanne was doing that in the 80s. And I think that that's a testament to her skills and talents. And I'm DJ Harold, by the way.